Hi and welcome to Driver Training. My name's Chris, and in today's session we're going to help you to understand more thoroughly the ADI Part 3 marking sheet. In a nutshell, the DVSA are just looking for three things on your ADI Part 3 test. The first is there a point to what you're doing today? Secondly, is it safe? And thirdly, did learning take place? That's it. So understanding the ADI Part 3 marking sheet will give you a better chance of success in the test. So the top part of our marking sheet just confirms your name, the test centre that you're doing the test at, the outcome, pass or fail, your personal registration number with the DVSA. But if you look down, you'll see logbook. That refers to your training notes from your trainer. After each session, you should receive training notes to know what points to strengthen or to work on. And that's why next to it, it wants your trainer's personal registration number. Underneath is just a brief overview of what your lesson for the day will be, whether it's junctions or dual carriageways, just so they have a note of it. And then the first of our sections that concerns us, which is lesson planning. So our first point on our marking sheet, did the trainer identify the pupil's learning goals and needs? Did the trainer identify the pupil's learning goals and needs? Not what is the trainer good at teaching? This is where most will fall down on their Part 3. It's not what you're good at teaching, it's what the pupil needs. So if you think to yourself, do you know what, I'm really confident on left and right turns. Does the pupil actually need to work on that? Or if you think to yourself, do you know what, I am really confident on left and right turns, I'd love to do them, then do you have a pupil who genuinely does need to work on left and right turns? Nothing wrong with using them and working to your strengths. But is it something that the pupil needs to work on, rather than is it something that the trainer enjoys teaching? Are you doing what is best for the pupil? It doesn't mean that the trainer decides the goals. What you have to do is identify them. These goals should then be clarified and agreed upon. Think of it like stepping stones. Driving a car. Ideally, the learner wants to be on that 40 miles an hour road in fourth gear, just cruising along, enjoying the weather. But you can't just go from first to fourth gear. You have to go from first to second to third, and then you'll get to that fourth gear. The same is true with driving lessons. You have to create small stepping stones so that the person can go from one to the next as a natural progression. So say for instance you're doing crossroads. You might start off with turning left at crossroads. You might then go doing right at crossroads from minor to major roads, because they've done left emerges, right emerges, but they haven't done straight ahead. So you would do left and rights first, then build up to going straight across from a minor to a minor road across the main road as the ultimate goal. So we have to go through the process of building them up to that skill. And remember, a goal must be achievable. So a roundabout isn't a goal, it's a subject. Speed on approach to roundabouts is a goal. Lane position on approach and around roundabouts is a goal. Judging gaps in traffic at roundabouts is a goal. Pulling out and getting up to the speed of traffic, that's a goal. So can you see, we have to have 2 or 3 little specific goals for the part 3. At the roundabout, take the second exit.
What lane is that?
Left.
Okay. Do I signal now?
No, once you pass the first one.
Okay. Here?
Yeah. And at this roundabout, take the second exit.
Is that left again?
Left again, yeah.
Signal now?
Now is good, yeah. At the roundabout, take the first exit. So remember, signal down.
Now?
Yeah. So do you see, she wasn't confident on roundabouts, so realistically he shouldn't have tried doing a different subject. Get them confident with roundabouts first, then progress. Point 2 on our sheet, was the agreed lesson structure appropriate for the pupil's experience and ability? So what you were asking them to do, were they out of their depth in doing it? It's their second lesson and you want them to do dual carriageways at 60 or 70. But then the opposite can be true. Were they then being challenged enough? So the pupil's experience comes in. What do they need to be working on now? But also their ability. Are they any good at the previous session? Was learning taking place so you can now move on? That's what needs to come to mind. So you might choose perhaps roundabouts. Well, if the roundabouts are empty and the pupil is working on pulling out into gaps on roundabouts, is your route sufficient that you can then go and do larger roundabouts, laned roundabouts? Are you able to do mini roundabouts where of course the traffic is closer, the gaps are tighter, you have to pull out quicker? Are you able to change it or do it for the pupil's experience? And also at the beginning, you can also ask your pupil, how would you like me to instruct you? Would you like me to fully talk you through it, prompted by means of questions? Or would you rather just try it on your own and we'll pick up on anything you need to work on? Point 3. Were the practice areas suitable? If you're going to work on crossroads, but you've got to drive 25 minutes to get to a crossroad, and then you can only do it once in one direction, and that's not really what the pupil needs, then the practice area wasn't suitable. If you're working on roundabouts, but there's only 2 roundabouts where you are, and they're all empty, really, was the practice area suitable? Well, no. So because of time restrictions, at the moment through COVID, remember, it's only 40 minutes. You really have to plan that route. So if you were working on roundabouts, can you pick an area fairly close that has normal roundabouts? Perhaps laned roundabouts close by, mini roundabouts, so that whatever the pupil's working on, hopefully as they progress, you can move on to slightly more difficult ones, or you can bring it back to slightly more easier ones, depending on the need of the pupil. So were you able to develop the lesson? Were you able to allow learning to take place? Linking with the practice areas is planning your route. You know, you need a good route, a bad route, and a medium route. What do I mean by that? Well, if your pupil's having a bad day where they're nervous, so you're working on dual carriageways, coming off the slip roads on them, joining them, but the dual carriageway you're on only has 1 slip road and it's 20 minutes away. What are you going to do if your pupil gets exceptionally nervous, the legs start shaking because the examiner's in the back? They're thinking it's a test situation and they just turn into a quivering jelly. How are you going to pull them up? How are you going to discuss whatever is going on or whatever needs to be worked on? Perhaps there was a tractor and they just didn't have it to spot it or overtake it, and the lesson just goes downhill rapidly. Where can you pull up? Where can you discuss what's going on? How can you calm the pupil down? That's one of the things you need to think about when planning your route for the part 3. A medium route, well, if they just do as you think they're going to do, are you able to either extend it to bring in more challenging points? Are you able to develop their learning? Are you able to alter it? So if they do start to panic on, say for instance, roundabouts, can you go back to a couple of quieter ones? If they're doing well or a little bit better, can you progress them? A good route, well, what if you're doing roundabouts and every roundabout you come to, they're doing it? It's one of the things for the ADI and the standards check, no matter how well you know the pupil, they never react how you think. The times you've had pupils that you think, oh, they're really chatty. Every time I ask them a question, you know, they want to know the ins and outs. And then on the day of the part 3, so would you like me to explain that to you, Chris? No, I'm fine, thanks. What? No, let's just do it. What? And yet every other time they want to know the ins, the outs, the whys, the wherefores. So what if your pupil is doing really well? What if they're nailing the goals that you've set? Can you up it? Can you go on to the next subject? Do you have a route available where you can introduce something more difficult? All this is part of planning a route. So planning a route doesn't need to be difficult. It just means thinking that as you go round, you're aware that at any point, for instance, you could turn left if the pupil is struggling. That would head you back towards the test centre or onto an easier route. Straight ahead would be to carry on as expected. And if they're progressing really well, you could even turn them right to help them progress towards their goals. Now, this is an example of a trainee who was working on meeting situations. We've come out of the test centre and we're looking for those opportunities. But as you can see, the roads that were being taken down don't have many or even any opportunities for meeting situations. Point 4 was the lesson plan adapted when appropriate to help the pupil work towards their learning goals. It's probably one of the major reasons for failure in part 3 that we have a plan and we're going to stick to it. We're doing crossroads, that's the whole aim. But the pupil is super nervous on the day. She's stalling, she can't move off, or he can't move off without stalling the car, but we're just sticking to crossroads. Wouldn't it be better to pull them up and say, look Chris, I know we were planning on doing crossroads, however, because of the man in the back or the lady in the back, I know we were planning on doing crossroads, but because of the person in the back, I think we're kind of nervous, which is understandable and it's fine. But one of the things with crossroads is being able to move off safely and under control. And at the moment, we seem to be having a few problems with that. How about we put crossroads on the back burner for the next few minutes and just go back to moving off safely and under control? Because, you know, it's something you'll need when you've passed your test and you got your 3 mates in the back of the car and you're heading to the beach. The last thing you want to be doing is stalling when you try and move off. And we don't normally do it, so I know it's just him in the back putting you off. So let's ignore him. Let's just concentrate on us. Does that sound a good idea? We'll just spend the next few minutes doing that, and then if time allows, we'll go back to doing the crossroads. In this session, we're going to deal with the ADI Part 3 marking sheet, specifically the risk management section, points 5 to 9. So in the ADI Part 3 risk management section, there's basically 5 points that score a maximum of 3 points each. Now you just have to score a minimum of 8 out of those 15 to pass your ADI Part 3. But the reason that this section is structured that you have to get at least 8 shows the importance that the DVSA place on the safety of the instructor, the pupil and the general public. When the examiner is observing your lesson, he just wants to know that safety is paramount. He wants to see that you can control the situations that the pupil puts you in, you can control the pupil and look after them, and also that you can control and be aware of your surroundings. So it's basically making sure that you, your pupil and the general public are safe. And that's why this section is the most stringent. It doesn't mean that something dramatic has to happen, that you have to hit the brakes or grab the wheel or tell your pupil to slow down. If you're in control of those situations, those should be preventable, because, you know, ultimately the skill of the driving instructor is to read the situations ahead, to be aware of the pupil and their limits, what they can and what they can't do, and to help a crisis happening where you have to jump in. We can proactively use questions and answers as a way of preempting what might happen ahead. And that's why you're managing the risk. So let's have a look then at the risk management section. We can think of this as sharing the safety. And that brings us to point 5. Did the trainer ensure that the pupil fully understood how the responsibility for the risk would be shared? So first of all, does your pupil understand what you mean by the word risk? And then, what is the pupil responsible for? What is the trainer, the instructor, responsible for? You see, it's not just the responsibility of the driving instructor or the trainer to take all the risk on board for themselves. Just likewise, it's not the beginner's job or the learner's job to shoulder all the risk for themselves. It has to be a shared skill set. What do we mean by that? Well, you've probably experienced something similar. If you've travelled on an aeroplane or a ferry, the first thing that happens when you get on a plane is the cabin crew tell you what's going to happen in an emergency. They do risk management. They tell you what will happen, what you need to be safe and to stay safe, and how they will look after you all the way through it. But there are certain things that you will need to do and take responsibility for. So that's the same for us as a driving instructor with our pupils. We want to manage that risk in the same way. Because driving a car with a pupil, whether they're a learner or a full license holder, there's an element of risk. We need to manage or share that risk. And it's not enough to say to someone, don't worry, I've got dual controls, I'll use them if necessary. For different people, that can mean different things. For instance, for a beginner, someone fairly new on a subject, you having dual controls can be a source of comfort, a way of safety. But for someone who's experienced, or a full license holder, for you to use the dual controls can be seen as a sign of failure, not being good enough. So we have to structure what we say and how we say to people. So for an experienced driver, you might say, I'm going to give you the responsibility for the drive. You're going to be responsible for the speed limits and driving to the best of your ability and to follow the rules of the road. If, however, you're not sure of anything, please feel free to ask and I'll help you. If you've got any questions about anything, if there's anything that you're unsure of, just say and we can cover it on the go. However, if I feel that you're not dealing with the situation in good time or in a safe way, I may intervene verbally. For example, I would say, slow down if you're exceeding the speed limit. For a newer pupil or inexperienced pupil, you might remind them that as a driver, they're still responsible for the safety of themselves, their passengers, and other road users. But you are there to help and instruct them and guide them through any situations that may occur. Do you know, it's amazing how many learners as they're driving will just say, oh, if there's a speed camera and I got caught speeding, do you get the fine and the points? And it's amazing how many learners then adjust their speed when they realise as the driver they're the ones responsible and they're the ones that get the fine and the points. So sharing that risk, giving them the knowledge they need, really will affect the way they drive. Point number 6, were the directions and instructions given to the pupil clear and in good time. So here we have two separate points to keep in mind. Were the directions clear and given in good time? I'd like you to turn right. Not now, not now, at the end of the road.
Okay.
Okay, Gemma, turn left. Not now, not now, at the roundabout. Fine. To say to a fairly new pupil coming up to a roundabout, take the third exit. Is that right, third exit? Is that straight ahead, third exit? How will they know what lane they need to be in? It would cause confusion, wouldn't be clear. Unless they're working on reading road signs and road markings, it will just cause more problems. Like saying, turn left at the end of the road, not here. It causes confusion. Think about how your sat-nav gives direction. At the roundabout, go right, third exit. At the end of the road, turn left. That's how we want to do it. Not just on the ADI Part 3, but on all of our driving lessons. So you say the destination first, at the roundabout, and then give the direction second. Go straight ahead, second exit. Also, were the instructions given in good time? Do we say it as we get there? Oh, turn left. Bear in mind, for learners especially, it takes quite a few seconds for them to process the information. Then very often they have to think, hang on, which way is left and which way is right? Or they have to think, at the roundabout, which lane do I need for that? So you have to allow them time to sort that out for themselves. If we think of giving directions in good time, think how the driving examiners do it. At the beginning of a test, they would say to someone, I would like you to follow the road ahead at all times, unless the road markings or signs tell you otherwise. If I need you to turn left or right, I will ask you in plenty of time. If there's anything that you're not sure of, please ask me and I'll repeat it. So we can do the same in our lessons. We can say we're going to drive to A, B or C, and unless I tell you otherwise, I'd like you to simply follow the road ahead unless the road markings or signs say otherwise. But if I do need you to turn left or right, I will ask you in good time. So we're giving directions clearly and in good time. So if we're having to talk about things with regards to driving on the go, the pupil has got time to take it in. They know they've got to keep following the road ahead. Therefore, it encourages the pupils to think about road signs and road markings and to get into the correct lane. And of course, they're not constantly asking you, where do you want me to go now? What lane should I be in? Where are we going? It frees up you as an instructor, but also helps your pupil. But more importantly, it shows you're giving directions in good time. Go left, Jem. And then just pull up here before the junction. Stop then, stop. That's it. So just there at the roundabout, we asked you to turn left. You didn't check your mirrors. You didn't signal. The position was kind of okay. The speed was too quick, and we certainly weren't looking to the right on the roundabout. So you just need to make sure you get the mirror, signal, position, speed and look going on the approach. Okay then, when you're ready, drive on. And take the next road on the left. Turn. Okay, and then just pull up here. Okay. Go right on the roundabout, right.
Which one?
That's it, this one here. Okay. So there, Jem, I just wanted to mention again, our lane position wasn't brilliant, was it? We didn't do our centre mirror and our right mirror. Remember, if we're going right on a roundabout, it's got to be right-hand lane, unless the road markings may tell us differently. Okay, so you really need to work on this to be able to pass your test. Okay, Jem, I'd like you to turn right. Not now, at the end of the road.
Okay.
Okay, Gemma, turn left. Not now, at the roundabout. And then pull up on the left. When it's safe to. It's not safe here, is it? Keep going. And pull up on the left now. So there, Gemma, at the roundabout, you just got to make sure of your signal timing. You're signalling left too early. You've got to make sure that you're at the roundabout before you put the left signal on. Otherwise, it becomes what's called a confusing signal. And the problem is that it can cause problems for other drivers behind us. So if you can work on that, it'd be great.
Okay.
So now the second part of that, were the instructions given to the pupil clear and given in good time? Now this has two meanings or two applications within itself. Were the instructions to the pupil clear? What you asked them to do, was it clear what you actually intended? So if you're going to turn left and you say check the mirrors, I want you to check the mirrors, and they check the centre and right, well, have they not checked the mirrors? The instructions need to be clear. I want you to check the centre mirror, then the left mirror. Put your signal on. Do you mean signal down? Turn the wheel. Again, one of the classic ones with moving off and stopping on the first lessons. The trainee, the instructor, will often say, well, steer, and they do full right lock. I don't mean that much. Well, tell me what you do mean. How much do you want me to turn? Do you want me to turn a quarter of a turn, half a turn? Do you want me to think of the steering as a clock face? Steer 2 o'clock, steer 10 o'clock, steer 12 o'clock. When you're coming up to turn left, change gear. Do you want me to go down into second or up into fourth gear? What do you mean by that instruction? So can you see, are the instructions clear? It's not enough for the pupil to fill in your blanks. You've got to say to them exactly what you mean. Because if not, and you say change gear and I went into fourth instead of second, have I not done what you've told me? Well, I have, but it wasn't what you meant. So tell me what you mean. Make the instruction clear. With instructions given clear, imagine that you're working on meeting situations and you say, watch out for the car. Be mindful of the car in front. What does that mean? Does that mean slow down, let the car through, then we go into the gap? Does it mean speed up because we're closer to the parked vehicle, we can get round before the other car gets to us? What does that instruction to watch out for the other car, or be aware of the other car, or be mindful of the other car, what does that actually mean? So can you see your instructions need to be clear? Ahead at the roundabout, second exit, you see the cars braking. See them brake. Slow down, slow down. Watch for this guy. Watch for him. So we've got cars coming. Brake, brake, brake. Don't go yet. With the instructions given in good time, again, as we've mentioned earlier, you've got to allow your pupils extra time to take in the information, then think, what do I need to do and where do I need to do that? So if we're approaching a junction to turn left and we say centre mirror, left mirror, do we give them time to actually look and assess what's in the mirror? Or does it become a case of centre mirror, left mirror, signal down quickly? You're not doing it in good time. Well, that's your job to help them understand that. So perhaps allow an extra 10 seconds. A great way to see how you're doing with this is record yourself, just as like we're doing now on an iPhone or whatever camera you have to hand, and then watch it back. What are your instructions like? Do they give the person that you're driving with enough time? You can also assess your own commentary. If you're driving along, drive yourself, commentary yourself, and go round a couple of left turns. Do you give yourself enough time to say, centre mirror, left mirror, now I signal down? Or, as you're saying it, have you already done it? Okay, Chris, check your centre mirror, check your left mirror. I've already done it. So if my commentary is wrong for me as a driver, it's going to be completely wrong for the learner who needs to think centre mirror. Oh, that one. Left mirror, left, that one. So can you see why instructions need to be given in good time? This part as well can also relate to your level of instruction, your instructions on how you've agreed to help the pupil. If you've said, okay, I'll leave the next few to you, do you actually do that? Or do you start jumping in? If you've agreed to give someone a full talk through by means of commentary, do you do that? And are you giving them enough time to deal with it then? Was the trainer aware of the surroundings and the pupil's actions? Do you notice again another 2 points in this one sentence? Was the trainer aware of the surroundings? Were you looking in the right place at the right time? This is why this is in the risk category. Did you see what was happening around you? The instructor needs to be aware, and we're talking 360 degrees aware of what's happening around the car. One of the most common faults you find with ADI trainees is they will say to the pupil, okay, drive on. And then the pupil says, do you want me to wait for this person to walk past? Do you want me to wait for this lorry to come past first? In other words, they weren't aware of what was going on around them. Asking the pupil to pull up on the left, except there happens to be double yellow lines there, or zigzag lines. Or the pupil pulls up and they're opposite a junction. Are you, as the trainee, as the driving instructor, aware of what's around you and your surroundings? Are you aware of other vehicles coming out of driveways, roadways, yellow box junctions, keep clear signs in the road? Are you aware of all of that? As well as being aware of what's going on outside, you need to be aware of what the pupil is doing. Did you see what the pupil did or didn't do? When they moved off, did they actually check the mirrors? Did they check their blind spot? So were you looking at what your pupil was doing? When they change gear, are they looking down at the gears? You need to be watching. When you're asking them to check mirrors, are they checking the mirrors? This is what you've got to be confirming. Are they doing what you're asking them to do? But also, how are they? Are they almost hyperventilating as they go round? Are there beads of sweat coming down? Are they gripping the wheel with that death grip, as we call it, that they're scared to let go? Are they letting out huge sighs all the time as if they're struggling with it? Are you aware of your pupil and their actions? That includes how they're reacting on the day. You could ask them, pull them up at the side of the road, scale 1 to 5, how are you feeling? You can link it with a scale of traffic lights. Red, I'd like to stop. Amber, I'm finding it a bit of a struggle, however I'd like to carry on. Or I'm finding it a bit of a struggle, I'd like to stop for a bit. Or are we green? I think I'm getting the hang of this. I'm okay to carry on going. So can you see, being aware of your pupil's actions isn't just, are they doing everything you're telling them when you're telling them? How are they reacting to the situation? How are they reacting to the day? Do they need a break? We had one situation where we were on an ADI Part 3 mock test and the trainee was teaching a family member, and the sun was coming in through the screen. It was coming into winter, so it was a fairly low sun, and the poor girl, she was squinting and she bowed her head down, so she was doing everything to try and keep driving even though the sun was blinding her. And in the end, as I was sitting in the back, I had to ask the trainee to pull up and help her with the sun visor. Does she know where the sun visor is? Does she know how to use it? Now that might seem strange, but how many years have you been driving? You don't know if that pupil, the family, has a car. She could be the first person in the family to go as a driver, and she's never had to use a sun visor. Does she know? Have you asked? It's your responsibility to find out. But if you see the pupil is struggling, then you need to help them. Was any verbal or physical intervention by the trainer timely and appropriate? Remember, above all else, the first dual control you have in the car is your voice. That's why it mentions that point first. Was any verbal intervention timely and appropriate? Interventions must happen if they're needed, but they should be explained to the pupil why you've had to step in. But we don't want to over-instruct. So the pupil is perhaps practicing dual carriageways. And as they come out of the test centre straight away, you're going, so don't forget, check your centre mirror, check your right mirror, signal up for right, position. They know all that. That's why you're working on dual carriageways. Look and assess them. If you're in doubt, use Q&A. But realistically, by the time they're working on dual carriageways, you shouldn't be having to tell them how to turn right at an open or closed junction. So we don't want to over-instruct. Ask proactive questions. As the roundabout is busy, what are we checking that left mirror for? What could come up the inside of us? And if it did, how would we react? What about physical intervention? Was any physical intervention by the trainer timely and appropriate? This is one of the problems when your commentary isn't quite up to scratch, or you're not really managing the risk properly. You'll get twitchy feet, especially if you've got a car with dual controls. You'll find your right foot or your left foot, whichever you're using on the brake, is just constantly twitching. Because what you should be doing at that point is either giving a commentary and saying, so as we're looking ahead into the distance, we can see a lot of brake lights going on. What do you think we should be doing at this point? Or if it's a full commentary, so check the centre mirror, come off the gas, start gently braking, bring the speed down to about 25. We can see a lot of brake lights going on in the distance, so we want to start reacting to that now. Not just hitting the brake, not just grabbing the wheel. There will come times when that needs to be done. That's why it says, is it timely and appropriate? If it just happens, you've got to control the situation. But if you've got time to either describe the situation going on ahead or ask proactive questions and get the pupil thinking about it, we've got a pedestrian ahead of us in the distance and he's looked over his shoulder twice. What do you think he might do? So what do you think it's best for us to do? Rather than just sit there, say nothing and then go, watch for the pedestrian. Remember, using the dual controls, especially the physical version, using the brake or pulling or pushing the wheel, should be the last resort, not the first. So our final point then, was sufficient feedback given to help the pupil understand any potential safety critical incident? So was sufficient feedback given? Now, one of the traps that everybody falls into in the part 3 is to try and say what happened while the pupil is driving. Well, think how you react. Have you ever been somewhere that you're unfamiliar with and you've had to follow a sat nav? And then as the situation gets busier and more intense, if the radio is on in the background, the first thing we do is turn the radio off. Why? Because we need all of our concentration to concentrate on the sat nav. The same is true for your pupils. You know, they're concentrating really hard on driving that car and dealing with whatever is happening in front of them, as well as looking for what lane they need to be in, what road position they need to follow. All that is going on, and in the background there's your voice. Now at that point, your voice is like that radio. It gets muted. Perhaps they don't verbally tell you to be quiet, but mentally they just stop listening to you. So if your pupil does something where they would have failed their driving test, or you would have failed your ADI Part 2, you need to pull them up at the side of the road and have their undivided attention, because then you've got to help them to understand what just happened. So first of all, does the pupil understand what just happened? If you had to do a verbal intervention or a physical, you had to grab the wheel or hit the brakes, do they know why? Do they understand why you did that? Do you as the trainer understand what just happened? So for instance, sometimes pupils will go wide when they turn left from a major to a minor road. Why did the pupil do that? Was the approach speed too fast? Was the point of turn wrong? Did they just turn too late? Did they turn at the correct point but just didn't turn enough? What was the actual reason for it going wrong? Because the feedback you give the pupil has to be accurate. And then, does the pupil understand the seriousness and the potential outcome of what just happened? Again, a classic one is moving away without checking a blind spot. Do you just say, oh, you need to check that blind spot? Oh, okay. Or do you give them time, pull them up, give them time to understand the seriousness? What if there was a 40-ton lorry coming past us at that point? What would happen? What if there was a person, a young person on a bike or a scooter, and you don't check that blind spot? Now you look in your mirror, you think it's clear. We pull out, what's going to happen? But then whose fault is it going to be that happened? Do we make them understand the seriousness of it? And at this point, we just want to stress, if the pupil does something that would mean they would fail their driving test, or you, if you'd have done it on your ADI Part 2, you would have failed the driving test, you need to pull them up and discuss it. Forget the 40 minutes wheels rolling thing. That doesn't apply. Anything that's a safety critical incident needs to be pulled up and discussed. And again, if you're covering a subject where you're on the go, like a dual carriageway, make a note of it. Make sure it doesn't happen again, whatever the incident was, and then at the best time, the first appropriate time that you can, pull up at the side of the road and discuss it. Because if you try and say it on the go, really it's not going in. They're not going to get the full understanding of why it's important to not do it, what the potential results of doing something like that is going to cause, and ultimately as the driver, who's going to be responsible for it. Can you see how this all links with the risk management section? As a final point, when you're giving that feedback, use your briefing folder, use your iPad, use your dash cam, use whatever it is that you've got to show them the incident, help them understand it more fully. Waving our arms around and going, what you did was that, and this was here, and that's why that happened, is pointless. Remember, the Part 3 is a teaching exam. You need, to the best of your ability, to show them the actual incident if you can, And if you've got a dash cam that connects to your tablet or iPad, use it. If we do that, then we are giving sufficient feedback and helping the pupil understand any safety critical incident that's occurred. We're going on to teaching and learning strategies. However, point 10 of that is, was the teaching style suited to the pupil's learning style and current ability? We've had quite a few people ask or say that they're not really confident what we mean by the pupil's learning style. So this video is basically just dedicated to that. It's just a brief look at what the 4 main learning styles are and how we as teachers can adapt our style to their style of learning. So did you know there are actually 4 main learning styles? The first, well, that's visual. People who want to see how it's done for themselves. Then once they've seen it done, they understand what's required. And that's why today YouTube is the second biggest searched online reference after Google, with over 5 billion videos viewed each day. The second way of learning, well, that's auditory. They learn best by listening. If we think of the popularity of ebooks and e-readers, we understand how popular that is. The third way of learning, well, that's what's called kinesthetic. They just want to get on and do it. They learn best by just having a go, seeing how it's done and trying again. Our fourth way, well, that's reading and writing. These learners learn best when it's written down so they can process the information first. So visual learners want to see it done for themselves, and over the last couple of years with COVID, haven't we seen the rise of people watching online videos for cooking, keeping fit, makeup and clothing tutorials? Every sort of subject is covered, and you're one of them. That's why you're watching this video now. So they want you to include pictures and diagrams. That helps them understand it more. You can recognise this in your students if you give them a pupil record card, for instance, and they often doodle on it. So for us as teachers, use your briefing folder or your tablet, or just a pad and a pen to put diagrams so they can understand it. You may even ask the pupil to draw for themselves what you're explaining. Many iPads and tablets have ways and programs that you can just do your own drawings, or you can explain something with your pad and your paper and then ask the pupil to draw what they think is required. You can also make printouts, do printouts for yourself. You can provide them via email, or you can just use a briefing folder. This is the one we use. Now this is available to buy from us in our online store, and again it just provides all the diagrams and pictures, and as it says, a picture paints 1,000 words. The more we can use this as a teacher, the more our pupils will really get the sense of what we're trying to teach them. Waving your hands around, trying to explain a picture that's in your head, really will be a pointless exercise. So moving on to auditory learners. Now these students would rather listen to a lecture than anything else. You may see them on computers learning, but you notice they've always got the headphones on so they can hear what is said. And that way they're getting the full sense of it. Another way to recognise this style is as you're talking, they may repeat what you're saying, but also when they read, they like to read aloud. And the best way for us as teachers to help them is get them involved in discussions. Ask them to repeat back to you what you're asking them to do. And the best way of doing that is just the traditional method, question and answer. To do that, just remember the basics, the who, what, where, why, when, how much. Make it interactive and engaging. Get them thinking on what you're asking them. Then they can either watch the videos or listen to audio tapes. So are you, as an instructor, listening to their learning style? Our third style is kinesthetic learners. Now these don't want to go through great amounts of briefings or read up on the wheres and wherefores. They just want to go off and do it. They want to learn by actually practicing it. Kinesthetic learners just want to get on and try it. They're not worried if it goes wrong. They will simply learn from the mistakes and try again. It's like when you sit next to a Rubik's Cube that hasn't been completed. You just get this overwhelming urge just to give it a go and see if you can solve even just part of it. But if you can't, it's not the end of the world and you're not that bothered. You just think, I'll either put it down or I'll try it again. So the best way we can teach kinesthetic learners is to just let them practice. You know, we all learn by doing. After all, we both know you can't simply learn to drive by reading a book. You've got to get on and practice. So do that. Let them practice. After all, you well know that to become a driving instructor, it's taking at least 40 hours of actually practicing it. And the way to recognise this is if during a briefing they're looking around like they're bored or not interested, it probably just means they want to get on with it and try it for themselves. We can just say, would you prefer it if we just had a go at this? Our fourth way, well, that's reading or writing. These learners prefer to see it written down so that they can look and absorb the information for themselves. These learners are drawn to expression through writing or reading. They want to read the user manual or the instructions over and over again before they even have a go at it. They may be fond of writing their thoughts down in diaries. These show that the person probably has a preferred learning style of reading. So for these students, we as teachers want to give them enough time to absorb the information. We can use the student record cards or reflective logs so that the pupil can see for themselves what we've encouraged them to do. And that's where our writing notes down helps them understand more fully the lesson and the things that are required to progress. Do you know, I've had pupils where I've been writing notes down on their record cards and they've actually said, "Oh, can I write it down, please?" So all we need to do is just carry some blank sheets of paper and ask the student at the end of the lesson or during the lesson to write down in their own words what needs to be built on or strengthened next time. Then they can take it away with them and get more fully the sense of what's required. So point 10 that we've covered in this video is really about, did you as the trainer or instructor deliver the lesson in a way that was suited to your pupil's learning style? Did they understand it? Not just in your opinion, but specifically with the examiner in mind. But if you don't seem able to reach a pupil with one way, just mix it up. Use diagrams, use commentary, use visual points, or write it down. You can even just ask the pupil. And that's where knowledge of your own style and preferences can really benefit you. What do we mean by that? Well, perhaps you're strong with visual references or saying things, but actually for those who need to learn by doing, the kinesthetic learners, you're not that keen on just letting them practice. And sometimes you see that because you see learners at the side of the road with their instructors and the pupils are completely disengaged, which means they're probably just thinking, yeah, can I get on and do this, please? So our teaching style needs to match the pupil's learning style. And by understanding this, it can help you improve and turn any weaknesses you have into strengths. And if you think that's why these series of videos contain audio, visual and written elements to them, so that way we appeal to all sorts of learning styles. But the second part of point 10, which we don't want to let go unnoticed, does it suit the pupil's current ability? Remember, on the day of test, what is the pupil's ability? Are they having a bad day? Are they having a good day? Or it could just mean what you're trying to teach them. Are they ready to progress? Or is it too much for them to handle? Have they had a bad night's sleep? Have they got problems at home distracting them? Are they just incredibly nervous because there's an examiner sitting in the back? All these factors can alter the pupil's ability to learn and take things in on a specific day. So if we can respond to how they're learning, then we really are making the lesson client focused. So the first point in point 11, was the pupil encouraged to analyse problems and take responsibility for their learning? So what we need to do is understand really what analyse actually means. And if we look up the word analyse, it means in the dictionary to examine something methodically and in detail. So when a pupil makes a mistake, you need to allow them time to examine it methodically and in detail so they really get the understanding of what has gone wrong. This is where the phrase see it, say it, and solve it is still true today. You see the fault, you say it, and you solve it. Whereas years ago, it would be the driving instructor doing all three. Now, the difference is we want to engage with the pupil and help them to identify what the mistake was, then analyse it, and then provide a remedy for it so that that mistake doesn't happen again. So you can still point out the issue that you've seen and you can tell them why it's wrong if they don't know, and you can tell them how to fix it, again, if they don't know. But what we want to do is find out what their knowledge is. We want them to be encouraged to solve problems. Because when we solve problems for ourselves, we get the understanding of it, and then we're more likely not to repeat that mistake again. Let's look at an example of this, shall we? So you've pulled your pupil up at the side of the road, and you've said to them, now back there, Chris, we were about to turn and I asked you to stop. Do you know why? They may say no. You say, well, you were going to cross the centre line. Now they're thinking, well, how else am I about to do a right turn if I can't cross the centre white line? They're thinking of the white line down the middle of the road. So the picture in their head is not the same picture that you have in your head. So by using a briefing folder and some pictures, you can simply say, at this point, Chris, when I asked you to stop, we were turning right in this position. If we turn right in that position, what's going to happen to the yellow car coming down towards us? Well, we might hit it. Yes. And whose fault would that be? Oh, mine. Why is that? Because I'm turning too early. Very good, yeah. Now, if we're in that yellow car and we see a car coming down like that, what do we think of that driver? Oh, we're not very impressed, are we? No. Would you be worried? Yes. So how can we make sure that this doesn't happen again? Can you remember what our focal or our reference point is for when we turn right? Oh, yes, you said I need to come up so that my side mirror looks like it's level with the centre white line of the road we're turning into. That's right, Chris, yes. And if we do that, we know we're always going to go round on our side of the road and not do what's called a right corner cut. In this next example, we've pulled the pupil up at the side of the road and said to them, "You signalled too early. You shouldn't have signalled." Oh, they're not going to know what you're on about. So again, if we take out our briefing folder, if we show them a picture and we say, "Chris, if we signal at this point here where the blue car is now, where does everybody think that we're going?" Well, they're going to think that I'm turning right at that first road, aren't they? Yes. And were we? No, it should have been the second road. So if there had been a car waiting to come out of that road, where would he have thought that we were going? Well, he would have thought we were going into that road. So what may he have done? Well, he would have pulled out in front of us. And then what could have been the potential problem with that? Well, we would have hit them, wouldn't we? Yes. And whose fault would that have been realistically? Mine for putting the signal on too early. That's right. So where do we want to signal then to make sure that this doesn't happen again? Oh, actually, I'm not too sure, to be honest. Well, Chris, that's fine. What we want to do is make sure we've gone at least halfway past that first road, and then we can put our right signal on. Then it's obvious to everyone we're not turning right into the first road, but we do want to turn right into the second road. Does that make sense? Should we go and try that again? In this final example, I'd like you to imagine that your pupil is driving down a 40-mile-an-hour road and the speed limit changes to 30. They go past the 30 sign at 36 miles an hour and eventually get it down to 30. So how can you help the pupil analyse what they've just done? Okay, Chris, so I asked you to brake and bring the speed limit down. Do you know why I asked you to do that? Oh, yeah, I was doing it. Why were we having to bring the speed down? Well, I was going past the 30 sign, wasn't I? Yeah. Now imagine as we go past that 30 sign that on the left there's a police car or a speed camera van, and you're coming past that sign at 36 miles an hour. Now you're right, you are slowing down, but that speed camera van, that police speed trap, is going to take a lovely picture of you doing what speed past that 30 sign? Oh, 36. Yes. What happens as a new driver if you get caught speeding? Do you know? Oh, I get 3 points on my license, don't I? Yes, you do. And as a new driver, how many points do you need to get in 2 years to be banned from driving? Oh, is it 6? Yes. So you're already halfway to being banned from driving just by doing that. Can you see how easy it is? Then you've got to go 2 years without that happening again. So can you see what would be easier to do? Oh, get down to the 30. Yes. So that as we pass the speed limit sign, we're actually doing that limit. You've got to think, Chris, if we go into a newsagent's to buy a paper and it's 30p, do you ever say to the man behind the counter, "There you go, mate, there's 36? No. So the same with our speed limits. We want to stick to them. Not only do we pass our test, but also we don't end up with the possibility of being banned from driving. Can you see the importance of why we're asking you to do that? Oh, yes. So can you see the difference between getting the pupil involved and asking them to analyse and bear responsibility for what they're doing, rather than just saying, you need to slow down, Chris, you're going too quick? The person understands it more, so they're less likely to repeat that mistake in the future. And it's just simply a question of just using questions. What happened there? What could you do differently? What could be the consequences of doing that? All of these things help them to analyse it, and then they feel better as the student because they're thinking, oh yeah, I figured that out. I get it now. I understand. Which means they're going to retain it for a lot longer. They feel motivated, they're encouraged, and they're taking responsibility for their own learning and actions. And that brings us on to point 12. Were opportunities and examples used to clarify learning outcomes? Now, this again falls into two halves. Were opportunities given? In other words, did you let them go and practice it? If they've got a roundabout wrong, did you try doing different exits to help them understand that straight ahead could be second exit on one roundabout, or straight ahead is third exit? Are you allowing them or planning the route well enough to give them opportunities to actually practice? Because as the old saying goes, practice makes perfect. The second part of this is, were examples used? So something that your pupil may have done wrong, or your pupil is working on. If you see other drivers doing that mistake, if you see other drivers doing something that they can learn from, do you use it? So going back to our turning right earlier in the video, when the pupil cuts across the centre line, we know they've done it wrong, and we've explained it to them, haven't we? We've then asked, what would you feel like if you saw someone doing that? But then what if you approach the next junction and you see an actual driver doing the same thing? You can bring that point out. So there, Chris, how do we feel about what that red car's doing? Can you see why it's important for us to make sure we don't cut across the centre line? Can you understand how it makes other drivers feel when someone does that? All the good reasons for us not to follow that example. Then we can just ask, well, does it make sense with what I've said? Does it make sense to the pupil and their understanding? That's what the examiner in the back is looking for, not does it make sense to the driving instructor. So point 13, was the technical information given comprehensive, appropriate, and accurate? Now, this is where keeping up to date with changes in the DVSA, especially through the Essential Skills book, if you don't know or you're not sure of something, then look it up, don't make it up. After all, if you're paying someone £35 to £45 an hour, wouldn't you want someone to know their job and be accurate with what they're actually telling you? Let me give you a couple of quick examples. Telling your pupil that they need to hold the steering wheel in the 10 to 2 or quarter to 3 position, or they'll fail their driving test, is not true. The most recent Driving the Essential Skills book of 2023, page 54 says that with regards to hand position on the wheel, you should place your hands on the steering wheel in a position that's comfortable and that gives you full control. Now, 10 to 2 1/4 to 3 is still the best way for learners to get used to steering without crossing their arms. But to tell them they need to hold their hands in that position to pass the driving test just isn't true. Another example is telling your pupil when they're joining a dual carriageway or a motorway that they need to turn and look into the blind spot. Again, is not true. Driving the Essential Skills, page 83 states, looking right round to check blind spots on the move is unnecessary and dangerous, especially when driving at high speeds. Another quite common one is telling pupils that they have to do roundabouts in second gear. This just simply isn't true. If you're on a fast-moving road, 40 or 50, and it's a large roundabout and you're going straight ahead, it's an open junction, you can see it's clear, you'll probably be able to go straight ahead at it in third gear at about 25 to 30 miles an hour. However, like with this mini roundabout, it's a closed junction, you can't see what's coming from the right, so you know you've got to come up, stop, go into first gear and then make sure it's safe to go. So what we don't want to do is fall in the trap of saying to people, you have to be in a specific gear and you have to be at a specific speed. That's simply not true because each roundabout is different. Another common one is telling your pupils that they can't flash their headlights to other vehicles. Now, this again isn't true. Driving the Essential Skills, page 264 says, when driving on dual carriageways and motorways, if you think a warning is necessary, flashing your headlights is usually better than sounding your horn. Page 116 says, sometimes you may need to move around an obstruction where the view is restricted. Flashing your headlights as you pass can help any approaching driver to see you. And that's always been true of very tight bends on country roads, that sometimes, especially of a night, it's better to flash your lights and then oncoming vehicles or pedestrians will know that you're there. But just to say to your pupils, point blank, you're not meant to flash your headlights, again, isn't correct information. Recently, we had a trainee who had been told by his previous trainer that when he was emerging left at junctions, it should generally be around 10 to 15 miles an hour. Now, if you tell that to your pupil, you're heading for a lot of trouble. For instance, if it's a closed junction, it means you can't see what's coming from either direction. So if you're by the give way sign on the left, you're not going to see the red car coming from the right. If you're by the give way sign, you're not going to see the bike that's coming from the left. You're not going to see anybody who's walking across the road by the purple car on the left either. So to say to somebody, you need to go round at 15 miles an hour, again, just isn't true. And then sometimes you might just get confused with things. So recently we had a trainee who, when we were working on country roads and overtaking, kept telling us that we couldn't overtake on double yellow lines, that it was illegal. And several times we asked the trainee, so it's illegal to overtake on double yellow lines? Yes, came the reply. What he actually meant was it was illegal to overtake on double solid white lines that were in the middle of the road, but he kept referring to them as double yellow lines. Now, especially for the ADI Part 3, this is where very often you will meet trainees who say, well, you know, I can get my pupils to pass, but I can't pass the Part 3. Your pupils will very often fill in the blanks. The person in the back knows the difference in what you're saying. So if it isn't accurate and isn't correct, you will end up failing the ADI Part 3 or the ADI Standards check. Point 14. Was the pupil given appropriate and timely feedback during the session? So that brings us back to what we mentioned earlier about see it, say it, and then sort it. If you see a mistake happen, let the pupil know. But just as equally, if they do something that is good, let them know about it. Very often you may hear a pupil turn around to you and say, "Was that okay?" That's a prompt that you could have already got in there and said, "Well done. We handled that one a lot better." So it always needs to be timely. You can't always deal with things in the moment, but you do need to make sure that all questions are answered and the situations are discussed, and then any positive or improvements are then brought out. Because if you're in the middle of a roundabout, you can't start discussing what might have gone wrong or might be doing better. You've got to let them deal with it, but then go back to that point. Point 15. Were the pupils' queries followed up and answered? So just offering a one-word answer doesn't help the pupil fully understand the problem. We're going back now to problem solving. You need to get that pupil to take the problem, think about it, and then help them to understand what the solution is. The ADI Part 3 and the ADI Standards check is really a teaching exam. We're there to answer questions and to complete the pupil's understanding. So as you're driving round, if you hear them ask questions, then that is a big clue that they've got a lack of knowledge. So if you say, go right at the roundabout, and they say, should I signal? Is that the left lane? Is that the right lane? Should I let them go first? Do I have priority? That's a clue that you need to pull up and discuss things to help them fully understand it, because it's so easy to just quickly say, yes, you can go, or no, they need to wait for you. But you need to help the pupil understand that for themselves and help it to really sink in. On a recent ADI Part 3, we had a trainee whose pupil had come up to a roundabout. There were two exits, one off to the left, one to the right. She'd been asked to take the first exit, and she said to the trainee, should I signal? He said yes, and they carried on their way. At the end, the examiner turned round and said, she asked you a question. Why didn't you explain it to her? The trainee said, I did, I answered it. I said yes. And he said, but would this have been better to say, imagine the situation is reversed. You're approaching the roundabout and you've got a car coming up to the roundabout. However, they've got no signal on. So do you go or do you stop? The pupil would more than likely say, well, I'd stop. Why? Because I don't know which way the car is going. Okay, fair enough. Now imagine that same scenario again, but the car coming up towards the roundabout puts his left signal on to say he's taking the first exit. Can you go or do you stop? Oh no, I would keep going, would come the response. Why? Because I know where the car from the opposite is going. That's right. So with that in mind, would you think it is better to signal on approach to those roundabouts from now on? Oh yes, definitely, would come the response. So can you see, if that question that was asked had been explored a little bit more, the pupil would have understood the subject more fully and been able to make better and more informed decisions in the future. So, point 16. Did the trainer maintain an appropriate, non-discriminatory manner throughout the session? Now, very often we apply this to the way we talk to our pupils, but it takes in more than that. You see, yes, it does apply to our pupils because we don't want to berate them, but it also applies to other road users. This would include using negative or derogatory references such as, oh, that white van man, or, oh, cyclists, they're all like that, as well as referring to our pupil perhaps by a pet name like calling them sweetheart or darling. We're meant to be professionals. So therefore, not just with the pupils, but with other road users, we want to encourage our pupils to try and see it from the other person's point of view. If someone goes flying past, you might say, oh, I wonder what's going on with them. We just don't know, do we? It could be that that person has just found out that a member of his family has been taken to hospital, or perhaps they've just had the school ring and say, your child's had an accident, you need to come quickly. We don't want to worry about other people and what they do. We just want to think about us. So even if we know the person or we say we use that term all the time, they're not terms of reference that we would want to use. As I say, we want to project that professional appearance to everyone. And that then brings us to our final point, 17. At the end of the session, was the pupil encouraged to reflect on their own performance? So first of all, why do we want to do this? Well, don't forget, it's quite a long process learning to drive. So there are many occasions when you ask a pupil, how did you feel that went? They'll say, oh, it was terrible. It really was. And you have to say, well, do you know what, Chris? We're only like 6 or 7 hours in. We've said most people, as a ballpark figure, take between 25 to 45 hours to come to test standard. So to be 6 hours in and be doing what we were doing today, I think is a very good improvement. So reflecting on what they've done during this lesson helps you understand how they're feeling, but also helps them understand how they're actually doing in the overall scheme of things. Now, at the beginning of the lesson, you mentioned a scale, so you can refer back to that at the end. So at the beginning of the lesson, Chris, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not very confident and 10 being ultra confident, you said when it came to lane positioning on roundabouts, you felt you were around a 3 or a 4. Now, how do you feel with picking the lane on the roundabout and staying in it? Oh, I think I'm about a 6 or a 7. Very good. So what do you think went well on that? We can ask what didn't go so well. There's nothing wrong with asking just questions to make sure they're actually knowing the answer. So if the exit is 12 o'clock or before, Chris, what lane did we go in? And if we did get in the wrong lane, what would we do differently next time? So what we're doing is just repeating and really sounding down the information that we've just spent the last hour going through. This then, of course, forms the basis of what you're going to work on in your next lesson. But remember, when it comes to the ADI Part 3 and the ADI Standards check, Just as in real life, they don't expect your pupil to be doing it like a professional at the end of the 45-minute session. Because in the real world, you could spend many hours sounding this down into a pupil if they struggle to really comprehend what they need to do, but then ultimately to be doing it. So don't base the end result on your pupil being able to do it perfectly. Remember, the ADI Part 3 and the standards check is a teaching exam. Are you teaching them to do it the way that they should? And then just a quick note to say reflective logs are useful. Hopefully you use this with your pupils, but let the examiner see you use them. There's nothing wrong with them. What we recommend is using our pupil progress book, and you can get these off either our eBay store or our Amazon store, and you can just write down what the pupil needs to work on for the next lesson. And the plus point with using reflective logs or pupil progress books is it's showing that although the lesson may be instructor-led, what you're actually doing is involving the pupils in their own learning. So we hope that this guide has been a help to you in understanding the ADI Part 3 and ADI Standards Check Test. And we're sure that if you can try and incorporate these things into your own lessons, then passing the ADI Part 3 and the ADI Standards Check Test will be a lot easier for you. Remember, the links are in the description below for the ADI Standards Check and ADI Part 3 explanation folder, our briefing folders, and also the pupil progress cards. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more hints and tips. So thanks for joining us today. My name's Chris from Driver Training Limited. Remember, teach well, stay safe, and we'll see you all in our next video.